Mangwanani Malelepo Vukenjani Class Vanave Africa. Welcome to Africa Good Morning, the news and current affairs show bringing you everything you need to know happening on the African continent and beyond. You are joined by Ashwin Berry and Glenora Shipura. How's it going, Glenn?
I'm doing very well. I mean, I had a good weekend, and so have you.
Absolutely. We are Arsenal supporters. We have no choice but to be joyful.
Yes.
Unlike some people.
Well, getting into what you can expect in today's broadcast, thousands again take part in anti-French protests and say enough is enough. Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso signed mutual defense pact, and desperate Sudanese face endless wait for passports so they can flee the war. We'll also be crossing over to Talengore in Zimbabwe, who will be filling us in on the news making waves there. Do stay tuned for these stories.
We are so excited to be kickstarting your morning with entertainment. Everything was happening during this past weekend.
Yes.
Exciting news. Wow, no, she was killing it already.
In my opinion, I don't see anything wrong with him serving the full term.
As well as keeping you informed on the issues that you need to know happening in and around our country.
Let's get into our top stories, starting with the Sahel region. The Liptako Goma Charter establishes the Alliance of Sahel States. Mali's junta leader Assimi Goita posted on X, the social network formerly known as Twitter. Its aim is to establish an architecture of collective defense and mutual assistance for the benefit of populations. The Liptako Goma region, where the Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger borders meet, has been ravaged by jihadism in recent years. This alliance will be a combination of military and economic efforts between the three countries, according to Mali's Defense Minister Abdoulaye Diop. Their priority is the fight against terrorism in the three countries. A jihadist insurgency that erupted in northern Mali in 2012 spread to Niger and Burkina Faso in 2015. All three countries have undergone coups since 2020, most recently in Niger, where soldiers in July overthrew President Mohamed Bazoum.
In our next story, desperate Sudanese face endless wait for passports so they can flee the war. Marwa Omar was one of hundreds who lined up at dawn to try and get passports in Port Sudan. 15 hours later, she still had nothing to show for it. 1 million people have crossed Sudan's borders since April, fleeing the devastating war between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces, according to the United Nations. The figure would probably be higher were it not for the fact that many, like Omar, needed passports renewed or issued from offices that shuttered their doors at news of the first gunshots on April 15th. Now, since the authorities inaugurated a new passport office in the eastern city of Port Sudan in late August, hundreds of people have lined up all day, every day. They are desperate to obtain paperwork that will allow them to leave Sudan's deadly war behind. In 5 months of the war, the violence has killed 7,500 people, displaced more than 5 million, and eroded Sudan's already fragile infrastructure, plunging millions into dire need.
Now, a few thousand people have demonstrated in front of a military base housing French soldiers in Niamey, Niger's capital, to demand their departure from the French forces in the country. According to one protester, Yaha Gaba, enough is enough. All Macron has to do is take his Macronies and his clicks and clacks. All they have to do is go back to their so-called country, France. Gaba stressed that people always say that Africans are the last in the world, but they asked the French to leave and they refused. Rallies to protest the 1,500-strong French military presence have attracted tens of thousands of people to the airbase, which hosts part of the former colonial powers contingent near Niamey's airport over the past 3 weeks. The Nigerian generals who seized power in the July 26 coup have denounced several cooperation accords with France and are demanding Paris withdraw its troops.
Thousands gather for Zulu Prince funeral. Thousands of mourners gathered in eastern South Africa's town of Ulundi on Saturday, September 16th, for the state funeral of Zulu Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Buthelezi, a veteran politician and controversial figure during the apartheid liberation struggle because of his bitter rivalry with the African National Congress, died last week, aged 95. The founder of the Inkatha Freedom Party, IFP, who served 2 terms as Minister of Home Affairs in the post-apartheid government, after reconciling with his governing ANC rival, had undergone a procedure for back pain in July. He was later readmitted to hospital when it did not subside. Some of the mourners were dressed in traditional Zulu outfits made of leopard and other animal skins and held shields crafted from cow hides. South African media reported that 2 giraffes and 6 impalas were slaughtered and skinned as part of the ritual preparations.
Now, in complying with the May 2023 Supreme Court judgment on the recognition of same-sex marriages in Namibia solemnized abroad, the Ministry of Home Affairs has started issuing domicile and other relevant permits to foreign spouses married to Namibians. Since announcing that it will comply with the court order, the ministry has been under pressure from members of the public opposed to same-sex marriages, as well as the ruling party SWAPO, which sought to evade the ruling by redefining the word spouse in the Namibian Immigration Act. This perhaps explains why officials in the ministry, including Executive Director Etienne Maritz, have ignored questions sent to them regarding the ministry having started issuing domicile and other permits. This follows a Supreme Court judgment in May 2023 ruling that same-sex marriages where one of the spouses is a foreigner concluded outside Namibia should be recognized equally. However, an anti-gay law passed by Parliament in July this year is waiting for approval by President Hage Geingob. Now, Namibian Sun has confirmed this from some same-sex couples who spoke to Namibian Sun on condition of anonymity, while some confirmed that while their applications are still pending, they no longer have any problems entering the country. We're going to be talking to Talent Gore about what's happening in Zimbabwe after the break.
Good evening and welcome to Sunset News.
Dutch ministers last year in a speech to rate in taxes and how much.
After the break, we take a look at the sports.
We bring you
economic indicators, tomorrow's weather and sports. I am Aina Raiza Kweyong.
All right, we're going to be heading into our top stories in Zimbabwe, talking to Talent Gore, starting with Tendai Biti, who thinks that President Mnangagwa should not take the de-dollarization bait from BRICS. And just a little context, BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they're creating a conglomerate of countries which are essentially going to be pushing a competitive side of world economies. And part of what this may mean, especially if you look at the undertones of it all, is that if you de-dollarize, then, for example, the United States cannot exact sanctions as efficiently as they would like to. However, Tendai Biti says this is potentially devastating for the economy. Talent Gore, please give us more.
Mangwana Nakanaka Africa. So, former finance minister and opposition CCC top politician Tendai Biti has said that, and also has warned of further economic disaster if President Emmerson Mnangagwa's administration takes the BRICS bait to dump the US dollar for an alternative currency. And as we all know, BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And Zimbabwe has recently applied to join. And as it stands, BRICS is currently seeking to put an end to the US dollar hegemony by introducing an alternative gold-backed international reserve currency. And Tendai Biti has said that Mnangagwa's plans to de-dollarize in order to align with BRICS philosophy would be disastrous, as Zimbabwe does not have the requisite conditions to dump the US dollar. He said that the regime's intent on de-dollarization should not happen, as it has further implications on our economy. He also said that this move will be an absolute disaster and will cost workers and pensioners. And conditions for de-dollarization do not exist in Zimbabwe, and that's the country should not join a BRICS, and they should not de-dollarize it, as it will further weaken our economy here in Zimbabwe.
I understand that ministers have pledged to sustain economic growth. Can you expand on this?
Yes, as you all know, last week President Emmerson Mnangagwa named his cabinet ministers, and the ministers, during their swearing in, they swore that they are going to they are going to sustain the current economic growth trajectory and stability, which are imperative towards achieving government's vision of 2030. The economy is projected to grow by 5.3% this year, largely driven by strong performances in sectors such as agriculture, mining, tourism, manufacturing, as well as the infrastructure development subsector. So the Minister of Finance, Professor Mthuli Ncube, vowed to ensure that Zimbabwe's economy keeps on to grow, and other ministers also pledged to ensure that Zimbabwe's economy will become a middle-income economy by 2030. So we're just going to see how that is going to be happening, and yeah, we're going to keep track on all those who have made pledges to ensure that the economy improves for the better by 2030.
I mean, I understand the proclivity to shuck and jive and dance for your new boss. But to sustain the growth of an economy, that economy would need to be actually growing. Yes, of course, we're talking about some expansions of 5.3%, but what was our dip prior to that? For example, if we're to say Zimbabwe's inflation rate is going to improve by 20%, that means it's improved from 170% to 150%, still maintaining its position as the second worst economy in the world. But fortunately, President Mnangagwa has made his son the Deputy Minister of Finance. Heading into the last of your stories, online scam leaves family homeless, saddled with $2,000 debt. Please get into this.
Yes, a family in Beitbridge, Zimbabwe, has been left homeless and saddled with a United States dollars debt after falling victim to a cunning online lotto scam. Amani's son was asked to deposit 2,000 United States dollars through Western Union to claim his prize. Desperate and excited, his father borrowed the money and sent his son to make the payment. And over a decade ago, Mr. Tarai Amani, a 71-year-old resident of Beitbridge, lost part of his house during Operation Restore Order. And apparently, this year, he thought that all his misfortunes have gone away after his son told him that they won a lotto on the internet, and he borrowed money. He borrowed 2,000 United States dollars and gave his son to deposit on Western Union so that they would redeem their £1 million lotto award. Apparently, it was all a scam, and this came to light when the scammers then asked the son to send another $1,000 for them to redeem the prize. Apparently, the Amani family then became suspicious, and they consulted the police. After they consulted the police then told them that it was all a scam and they had been duped. So in order for them to repay they had given their house for collateral when they borrowed the 2,000 United States dollar. So the person in which they had borrowed that money then evicted them with a court order. So now they're left homeless, and their community that they live in, they are mobilizing funds to ensure that they give back the money which was borrowed, so that the Amani family can be given back their house. And the police and everyone else is encouraging people not to fall for these online lottos, because they are all scams. And it seems like people don't learn, because this is not the first time that this has happened. We've had thousands of people who have been duped of their monies. We have pyramid schemes in Zimbabwe which are taking people's monies, and people are being warned not to partake in these, but they keep on partaking in such scams due to lack of knowledge.
Yeah, and of course, the desperation is always a factor. For a lot of people, they feel like there isn't much future with regards to managing to make a living in Zimbabwe, and folks always take advantage of the desperate. We certainly hope that that family can get their house back. Thank you very much, Talent, for bringing us the news stories from the House of Stone.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for having me.
Let's take a look at our weather predictions before we get into economic news.
Now, in our first economic news story, Johan Maas, Group Chief Financial Officer at Capricorn Group, talks about inflation and interest rate adjustments during Capricorn's annual results adjustments and integrated report launch.
My belief is that they saw it as because of the inflation coming from fuel prices, that it's imported inflation and that the interest rate adjustments would not have made a big difference to it. I think to a large extent they have proven themselves correct, because without that the inflation rate still came down to 4.6% as at June 2023, and it even came further down afterwards, with them recording an inflation of 1.5% during July 2023. In Namibia, and we saw a 300 basis points increase in the repo rate for the financial year, as the central bank used that as a lever to try and control inflation. But it was still 50 basis points less than what our neighbors to the south did, where they increased their repo rate by 350 basis points. And it is pleasing to see that we haven't experienced that capital flight to them that we normally see when our rates are lower. So I think that does mean that the international investors are really seeing a good potential future for Namibia. Now, with these interest rate increases, obviously it does benefit the bank when the rates are higher, but we need to take into account that from a funding point of view, these rates also go up quite significantly when we do see these rate hikes, especially from a Bank Windhoek perspective, where a large chunk of the book is in stable funding in order for us to maintain our liquidity levels.
Now on to some headlines from business in Africa. Alice Reserve brings you 5 stories that have been making the business headlines in sub-Saharan Africa this week, including a new African credit rating agency and the EU chief calling for more engagement with Africa.
Here is what's been making the business headlines in sub-Saharan Africa this week. Emirates Airlines will resume flights to Nigeria and lift a visa ban on Nigerian travelers, the Nigerian presidency said on Monday. The leaders of the two countries met in Abu Dhabi to lift the ban and agree on new investments into Africa's largest economy. The African Union is planning to launch a new African credit rating agency next year. The aim is to address the group's concerns that ratings given to countries on the continent are unfair, an official told Reuters. The agency would craft its own assessment of the risks in lending to African countries. It would be based on the continent, be self-funded, and would add context to the information investors consider when deciding whether to buy African bonds or lend privately to countries, the African Union said. The 3 big ratings agencies, Moody's, Fitch and S&P Global Ratings, have denied bias and say their ratings follow the same formula across continents. Rwanda will build a test nuclear reactor using a novel technology under an agreement between the East African country and a Canadian-German company called Dual Fluid Energy, Rwanda's atomic energy regulator said on Tuesday. The reactor will use an innovative technique developed by the startup company using liquid fuel and lead coolant, resulting in less radioactive waste, the Rwanda Atomic Energy Board said in a statement. The European Union must engage more with African countries, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said in her annual speech to the European Parliament on Wednesday.
We need to show the same unity of purpose towards Africa as we have shown towards Ukraine. This is a must.
And finally, President Xi Jinping said on Friday that China supports Zambia in safeguarding its national sovereignty, security and development interests, while encouraging more imports from the southern African country. Xi met with Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema in Beijing, and the two countries upgraded their ties to a comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership, the Chinese state news agency said. Xi vowed to work with Zambia to expand cooperations covering infrastructure, agriculture, mining and clean energy.
Let's head into the economic indicators just before we dive into the sport. Well, it was an interesting sporting weekend. Looking at the English Premier League, Manchester City maintains its unbeaten streak at the top of the table. Liverpool got the best of Wolves with a 3-1 win. Arsenal beat Everton at Everton for the first time since 2017 with a 1-0 win. And Manchester United fell 3-1 to Brighton. Looking at rugby on Friday, the Volviches were certainly hoping for a better performance than they put up against New Zealand. Unfortunately, they were outclassed on that one. South Africa certainly got the best of Romania with a 76-0 win, and Fiji registering the first upset of the Rugby World Cup, beating Australia 15-22. Staying with the Rugby World Cup, Samoa, Wales and Ireland all added wins to their column in their pool at the Rugby World Cup on Saturday. Now first up was Samoa, who made a slow start before outclassing World Cup debutants Chile 43-10. In Niger, Wales withstood a superb display of endeavour from Portugal to claim an entertaining 28-8 victory in their Pool C clash, and Johnny Sexton became Ireland's all-time leading point scorer.
Now, Harry Brook has replaced Jason Ray in England's final 15-man World Cup squad. Opener Ray was in the provisional squad announced last month, but missed the recent one-day internationals against New Zealand because of back spasms. Now, Brook scored only 37 runs across 3 matches against the Black Caps, but has starred in international cricket over the past year and can bat in both the top and middle order.
That brings us to the end of our sports stories. Let's swing over to your highlights.
Welcome to My.NA Cars, your ultimate destination for everything automotive.
I am your host, Diana Master.
Teamwork makes the... Right?
Let's discover the latest models, innovative technologies, and expert.
Let's get into the highlights from this morning's broadcast. Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso sign mutual defense pact. Desperate Sudanese face endless wait for passports so they can flee the war. Thousands again take part in anti-French protests saying enough is enough. Johan Mas Group Chief Financial Officer at Capricorn Group talks about inflation and interest rate adjustments.
And with that, we've come to the end of our broadcast. Do remember that you can catch us tomorrow, same time, same place. From me, Glenora Shipura.
And me, Ashwin Berry, Sweta Jaganaka.